This is Pastor David's Daily Bread Guide message. Today's chapter is 2 Chronicles 18. The title is A Critical Failure of Jehoshaphat. Until chapter 17, Jehoshaphat followed the way of the Lord, and he was evaluated as the king who followed the King David. In chapter 18, verse 1, it says, Jehoshaphat had great wealth and honor. He did the religious reformation like David, and also he made the Word of God movement of the Word of God, and he sent Levites for this movement. And why then did he ally with Ahab by marriage? Verse 1, it says he allied himself with Ahab by marriage. So he was the one who was like King David, who followed the way of the Lord. But why suddenly he allied himself with Ahab? Let's look at today's chapter and divide it. It can be divided into 4. Verse 1, Jehoshaphat allied himself with Ahab by marriage. In verse 2 to 3, Jehoshaphat and Ahab decided to go to the war. Verse 4 to 27, Jehoshaphat and Ahab asked to prophets. In verse 28 to 34, the depth of Ahab. So, as verse 1 says, Jehoshaphat and Ahab made the strategic marriage, which is also called political marriage. When we decide some important issues, we have to ask whether this helps spiritually or not. The problem of Jehoshaphat was because he valued the political merit than the spiritual merit. As verse 1 says, Jehoshaphat had great wealth and honor, and I think he might have some complacency, and it made him very dumb in his spirit and to make his decisions, or it was his just character that which made him hard to refuse to the suggestion by someone else. So whatever the reason, he made the decision to follow the political merit rather than the spiritual the merit. This is the same for the family. Even though you have a spouse, you have children, and your parents, and they ask you to do something that's against the Word of God, and if you think this is not what pleases the Lord, then it's clear that you decide not to follow their opinion or suggestions if they are not pleasing the Lord. So this decision cannot be affected by the relationship. So they married, and Athaliah, who is the granddaughter of Ahab, and she's the one who made the political massacre. So for 3 generations, for 15 years, she was the one who was committed to kill the older people in Judah. So because of the wrong decision of Jehoshaphat, it became the root for the curse of the nation. There is the Bible verse says, "Do not be yoked with unbelievers." This is a very important message that we should not be yoked with non-believers in marriage or in business. We have learned the lessons from the marriage between Jehoshaphat and Ahab, and how this decision has led to the demolishment of the nation. The third part starts from verse 4. So Ahab and Jehoshaphat, they asked the prophets whether they have to go to the war or not. They already had the decision. They wanted to go for the war. And all the prophets, actually they are all false prophets, 400 prophets, they wanted to give the answers what they want, what Jehoshaphat and Ahab wanted. So they said, go to the war. Here's another lesson, that the religion and politics should be divided. Sometimes they manipulate each other if they are wrongly lied. So verse 13, there is the prophet named Micaiah. He said, "As surely as the Lord lives, I can tell him only what my God says." Previously, the messengers who had gone to someone, Micah said to him, "Look, the other prophets without exception are predicting success for the king. Let your word agree with theirs and speak favorably." But Micah said, "I can tell him only what my God says." So he was not affected or manipulated by what others say, and he just chose to say what God told him to say. Verse 22, there is a very important lesson. So now the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. So there is a deceiving spirit. The Rome chapter 1:24 says, "Therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another." Verse 28 also says, "God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done." So there is a sinful desires, like a deceiving spirit, and God just gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. So we need to get rid of this deceiving spirit. God gave us free will, and this is our decision to choose whether to follow or to be debased with a deceiving spirit and sinful desires. Finally, verse 33, someone drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the breastplate and the scale armor. The king, Ahab, finally got killed. So to make the conclusion of today's chapter, first, we have to choose the spiritual things rather than the political merit. If we choose the political or something that sounds merit, that sounds good, if we choose over the spiritual thing, then this decision will difficulties to our life, finally. The second, Jehoshaphat, maybe by his character, didn't say no to Ahab for his suggestion, and he basically had this relationship with Ahab. So we have to decide and be very careful whom to meet, whom to have relationship. And we definitely have to meet a man of God in marriage and also in business. So God bless you to follow the lessons that we learn from the chapter.